In this project, we are going to make a roulette game, and as part of the game, there will be some animations on the LED matrix. Because this is going to make the code really long, it's a good opportunity to introduce the programming idea of a function, which will just make our code much more readable. Let's get over to the MakeCode editor. Let's start a new project, and we'll just call it Roulette. To begin with, in this, we will do what we always do. We're going to call it Roo. And because this is a game, we are also going to use the game state variable that we've been using quite a lot. I'm going to put a comment. 0 is going to mean waiting to play, and 1 is going to mean playing. It's going to be a pretty simple game. When you press button A, it will simply change the game state to 1, which means that the game is going to be played. And really all of the action for this is going to happen in the forever loop. So as always, we want the program to recognize, are we waiting to play the game or are we playing the game? And so we use the if logic check that we've been doing so much as well. We'll get out the comparison. If the game state is 0, then we want to tell the person, you need to be playing the game. So we're going to open up the show LEDs, and at first we're just going to write a great big A. And then we're going to get another one and put an arrow, which is also pointing towards the A button, so that hopefully the person realizes you need to press A. Right, so when somebody presses A, the game state will change to 1. And so now, as the computer keeps repeating through the forever loop, we need to tell it what to do when the game state is equal to 1. Well, in our case, there's only a game state of 0 and 1. So if the game state is 0, then do this. Else means do the other thing. It's just going to be a random choice because it's roulette. So we want to make a new variable, and we'll call it random choice. I'll put that in there. So the first thing that's going to happen when you press A, the next time it goes into the forever loop, it will choose a random number. Well, we've called it random choice, but at the moment it's just 0. So that's not really very random. To get a random choice, we need to go into the math or the maths blocks, and we need to pick random and put that in there. Now, we just want to choose A or B. We just have 2 choices. So I'm going to leave it as pick random 0 to 1. And what will happen there is the microbit will just randomly choose a 0 or a 1. We want a nice little animation to happen to make it look quite interesting. And so I'm going to start working on that. If I go down here, I'm gonna make it like a clock. Okay, that took a while, but if we just look, we've got this quite long animation, and as you can see, it's going to look something like a clock going round. And it starts from what will be something like 12 o'clock, and it cycles around right around the bottom and then right back up to the top. Now, just to emphasize the end, I want to maybe make it flash a little bit. Let's say do this 3 times. So the first way that I could do this is just to repeat this. Now, that is one way of doing it, but there is a better way. In our case, we need to go into the loop and just say, get this one out that says repeat so many times. Now I'm just going to steal the last 2 blocks out, the bottom there, and put them into this repeat. And I'll change that to 3 because we just want to repeat it 3 times. Take out those, just throw them away because we don't need them. And then I'm going to put this repeat block in here. And what's going to happen is the microbit is going to go through this animation, and then after this one here, which is almost the 12 o'clock position, it's going to go into this loop, and it will count it itself. I just need to tell it how many times I want it to do this, and then it will do this display of LEDs, then this one, and then it will do it again for a second time, and then again for a third time, and then it will just move on I want to show what happens if you win or if you lose. Well, this is totally random, but of course we started that right at the top by choosing the random choice. So although we've been going through this animation, the microbit already knew if we'd won or lost. That's fine, because the person playing the game won't know either way. But we need another logic loop for this. So let's pull this out. Get another comparison, and we can say if the random choice is equal to 1, which is a win, then we're going to do another animation. So let's do another animation. Now for this one, I have an idea where I'm going to do something like a smiley face that comes on from the bottom. So it looks like a open mouth, so happy you won the game. Ah, something like that. Now, if you lose, we need to add in another statement. So here we're checking if you won or lose. Well, if random choice is 1, that means you won. If it's not 1, then it must be 0, because right back up here, we're choosing only between 0 and 1. And in this case, it's integers, so you can't get 0.25 or something like that. You can only get 0 or 1. So let's press the plus. And if you lose, let's keep it simple. I'm going to go into basic and choose an icon. And I quite like the icon of what I think is a skull to show that you lost. When the person has finished playing the game, if they won, we see this whole animation. And then after the animation has been played, we need to set the game state to 0 again to show that the game has finished now, you can play again. And we also need to do that in the bottom one. So if you lose, it sets the game state to 0. Okay, something we haven't really used so much so far is the simulator, which is in the top left. And here you can see the microbit is displayed. Now, at the moment, we haven't played the game yet. It should just be showing the A plus the arrow that goes left, but you can see it's also showing the skull. What's happening is it's doing all of that if loop, and then it's doing the next one where it's checking if random choice is equal to 1, which it's not, and so it's just doing what's in the else loop. To fix this, we need to pull this block out of the bottom and we need to stick it in underneath the game. Okay, if the game state is waiting to play, you just see the A and the arrow, which is correct now, that's working. And if not, then it will play the game. To play the game, it will choose 0 or 1, and then it will go through this animation, which is really long. When it's finished the animation, it will go into another logic check, and it will say, is that random choice 1 for win or 0 for lose? Well, if it's 1 for win, then it shows you another animation, and then it changes the game state to 0, so you can play again. And in all of the situations, i.e. you lost, it will show the skull icon, and then it will change the game state to 0, so you can play again. There's one more thing I'd like to do, which is I'm going to get a pause, a 2-second pause. So we'll show the skull, and then we'll have a 2-second pause. Can you remember how many milliseconds a 2-second pause is? 2000 milliseconds. And now we can actually play the game in the simulator because the buttons are actually something that we can use. Okay, so I pressed A. Now it's going through the whole clock animation. Ooh. Flashes 3 times, and then it gives me the skull. And it pauses for 2 seconds because I lost. Let's try again. Hey, this time I won, and I got the win animation. Right, firstly, let's put this onto the microbit. I'll download it. And you can see it's working exactly like it did in the simulator. Everything is fine. Flash, flash. And in this case, we won. Yay! But we actually had a problem when we were doing this, which is the if block was accidentally in the wrong place, and that's because the code was so long, it was getting quite confusing. So what we can do is we can take chunks of code out and we can put them in a big box. And then we can just refer to that box in other parts of our code. And we can say, you know, that's pretty long, or there's a load of something I want you to do there. A function is where we actually just put any amount of code. It could just be one value, or it could be lots and lots of code. It doesn't really matter. But it's a special box. And then when we want to use that box, we call it, just like, hey, come over here, like when you call for somebody. In this case, we go into the advanced blocks, we press functions, and we press make a function. Let's just change the name to game animation. Now for the game animation, it's really all the LEDs. So I'm going to pull all of that out. And I'm going to go down to the bottom of the LEDs because I don't want everything in. And then there's this if statement checking. So firstly, I'm going to get all this animation and I'm going to put it into the function. I need to use that at this point in the code. To use the function, I need to go back into the functions block and get this call animation. And then I just put that there. Right, now I can pull the rest of it up and put that back inside. This second win animation is also quite long. So I'm going to go back into functions and make a function. And I'm going to call it win animation. And that'll do. It's all these LEDs. So I'm going to grab them and take them out. I'm just going to go down and check. And then it says set game state. Well, I don't want to set the game state here because I called my function win animation. So to do anything that is not the animation is confusing my code. I put all these LEDs in, win animation, and now there's nothing. So if you win the game, I need to call the function win animation, and then I can set the game state back to 0. The code is so much more readable now, and it makes sense as well because I gave the functions sensible names. If we're playing the game, we're at this else point here, and then it sets random choice, so the microbit chooses a random 0 or 1, and then whatever, it's going to play the game animation. I said call game animation, it's obvious what's going to happen. If your random choice is 1, which means you win, I call the win animation. So it's very obvious what's happening here. But the details of the win animation, I put those all into this function just to get them out the way so that my code is a lot clearer. And then if you lose, it's just the same. You get the skull, and then it pauses for 2 seconds, and then it changes the game state back to 0 so you can start again. We can see in the simulation in the top left that it still works perfectly fine. We can download it again. And now we're ready to play again. Are we going to win? Are we going to lose? Are we going to win? Are we going to lose? What? 2 extra animations. We lost. We lost. In the next project, we are going to make another random game that just chooses a random animal. The important thing that we'll be doing here is we'll be using a new way of organizing data when you program, which is called an array. And that will be something that we'll build upon to make much more interesting games in the future.